Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Alright, it is finally time for my April 2025 wrap-up. I only made it through 4 books this month, which sucks. I always try and get through 6, but I made it through 4, which is a step up from some of the other months that I've had this year. I'm on track to be more towards 6 this year, or this month. But we will see where we go. But I have a lot of new releases here, and then one book that I've been just dying to finally read forever. And it's nonfiction. So I actually only have 3 horror novels and then 1 nonfiction read. And I'm going to talk about that as we dive into this. So let's go. All right. So apart from the nonfiction book, I do have in detail reviews on every single one of the other books. And book 1 was the latest release from Anya Ahlborn. This is Good and Joyful Things. This came out technically in 2024, but it was released exclusively through Suntop Editions. So it was like over $100 to get a very like limited edition deluxe copy of the book. I waited like 8 months for it to come out in paperback, which it did earlier in 2025. Came out in the end of January, but I didn't even realize it had come out because there's like just no marketing for it until I want to say like March. But I picked it up because Anya Ahlborn, one of my favorite authors, I read it, and I've got some things to talk about. And I really dive deep into my thoughts on this one in my full-length review. But I'm going to read the back, and then I'm going to briefly explain my hesitations on this book. Simone and Elliot Evans have it all. A comfortable life, a house on a quiet street, and 2 sweet daughters. But their marriage is far from happy, especially now. While Elliot spends all day at work, postpartum depression presses down hard on Simone's shoulders. Baby Lizzie is colicky and often sick. 5-year-old Aster is a handful, not at all as good as a helper as Simone had hoped. The more time Simone spends home alone with the girls, the more she's convinced that Elliot's interest in his family is waning. He's pining for his ex, Leighton Prescott, a woman who mysteriously disappeared from their small New Hampshire town years before, leaving her and Elliot's then newborn daughter Aster behind. When Simone confronts Elliot in search of the truth, he reminds her that this isn't the first time she's accused him of being unfaithful, and it isn't the first time her assumption has been wrong. But when Simone spots Leighton at the grocery store in their tiny hometown, she has her proof. Leighton Prescott is back, and despite what Elliot says, Simone knows Leighton will stop at nothing to destroy the life she's built with Elliot, piece by precious piece. Terrified of losing her family, Simone puts Elliot to the ultimate test. He's left with one chance to save the marriage he vowed to preserve. But rather than rekindling the love he and Simone once shared, he instead uncovers an unfathomable truth about the woman he calls his wife. A woman that, as it turns out, he doesn't know at all. Alright. Here's my thing. Anya Ahlborn is known for writing her classic familial horror. That's the style of horror she writes, horror of the family unit, and questioning the loyalty of the family unit, and what one will do to protect the family unit when being basically presented with the corruptions and evil deeds and monstrosities of a beloved family member. That's her thing. She does that in a horror setting. This is a family drama and a thriller that has some kind of horrific elements, but not really until the very, very end. And I think that was my big issue with this novel, is this read more like a psychological drama than it did a horror novel. And even when you get to the end and the big reveal and everything really goes from 0 to 60, it still didn't feel like a classic horror story. And so I can see why a lot of people were maybe let down by this novel. There's also a ton of typos in this. This is a self-published release from Anya Ahlborn, which is a bummer. I mean, maybe that's really cool for her to like not have to worry about a publisher, but you know, maybe that's also why it wasn't really marketed thoroughly, but maybe she had like the publishing rights to Suntop Press. I really don't know. But lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of typos. I kind of got over it. Whatever. I love this author. I'm more invested in the content than the text, if that makes sense. And I understood what she was saying. But yeah, it was just, it's a thriller. It's a family drama about a really, really messed up family that does some crazy, crazy things in some extreme circumstances. And lots and lots and lots of unlikable characters. But it's cool to see Anya Ahlborn branching into different realms of the horror sphere. So definitely on the tamer side for what Anya writes, but a really cool look at like the psyche of a lot of her characters. You really get inside the heads of our main characters, which I thought was done very, very well. believe I gave this a 4 stars. That was pretty generous. It's definitely not the best thing I've ever read from Anya Allborn, but it's not the worst. You know what? And going into it, I think if you know that this is going to be more of like a thriller, like I just watched A Simple Favor for the first time last night, and I like kind of loved it. It's like really, really good and eerie and fun, and like Anna Kendrick's character is so like bizarre and quirky, and then the ending is just like ridiculous. But I liked it, and I feel like if you like that and like the kind of like burn of that and then this like ramped up crazy ending, you'll probably really enjoy this. So 4 stars. Not my favorite from Anya Allborn, but if you really like her the way that I do, I would read it. All right, next up. This was in a recent Twisted Retreat package, and I wasn't sure if I was going to read it because the version that I have has just like the most terrifying like limited edition cover, and I can't even open the inside of it because I think YouTube would literally ban my channel and show you what was on it. But I was a little hesitant and a little worried to read it, and then a lot of people on my channel were like, oh my god, you have to read it, it's so good. So I read it. It was very, very interesting. So this is Hush My Darling by Lee Kenny. This is, let's go with borderline extreme horror. Lots of situational horror, a lot of things happen, definitely a lot of trigger warnings that you're going to want to check into. This wasn't anything that I really couldn't handle. The big trigger warning I want to point out with this novel, that if you're on my channel, you know that I talk about this quite a lot. There is a dog that is a main character. The dog does not make it through the end of the novel. Do not be discouraged by that. The dog's character was actually written as a tribute for the author's actual dog, and it was based on the actual dog's life. There's a whole note from the author at the end about the importance of the dog. The dog has a very good and happy life, so it's not like an animal cruelty thing. There is something where something bad happens to the dog very, very briefly, and the person who does it gets what's coming to them, and it's really not that terrible or gruesome or graphic. You can tell that Lee Kenny loves dogs. You can tell that she loves dogs. So I just want to point that out there. Let's read what this book is about. In pursuit of peace and family ties, American tourist Megan goes on a road trip around Ireland. When she becomes stranded deep in the mountains, the Brogan family come to her rescue. But is it luck, or is Megan's nightmare just beginning? The Wicklow Mountains offer breathtaking beauty to all who venture in, where nature abounds, where solitude beckons, where no one can hear you scream. If you're a fan of like Brother or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you'll probably really like this book. This is another story about that kind of family. It's definitely different versus Brother, where you're in the mindset of one of the family members. This is told through the eyes of one of the victims. Unfortunately, this victim like just completely ignores every red flag humanly possible, and is extremely, extremely gullible. I don't want to say dumb, but she's not the brightest bulb there is. Luckily, she doesn't really remain a victim style character. Like, she really just come into her own and kind of becomes a very like feminist fighting force throughout the story, which I really, 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 really do appreciate, but not the brightest. I really was on board with this novel for quite a while. I think the ending is what really killed it for me. There's like a kind of vague open ending that leads you to potentially think there could be a happy resolution, but then there's like a short story included in at least my copy. I don't know if it was included in all copies of the book, that kind of gives you a completely different perspective on what that ending was. It makes it a lot heavier and a lot more bleak. And I just really wish that Lee Kenny had kind of chosen what ending she wanted to stick with, because it's almost like she wrote the book with this like sort of happy ending and then was like, actually it would be so much better if it was like really depressing, and attached like an extra 40 pages on to like really just make the reader feel awful inside. So I didn't love that. I found that there were definitely some plot holes. I'm really interested in the dynamic of the family, but I'm more so interested in the dynamic of the family's relationship with the neighbors, who seem very much aware of what's going on. And that's kind of this topic that's like brushed upon, but then completely forgotten. And it created a lot of plot holes for me as I was looking back on the story. Another big issue that I had with this book is Lee Kenny seems to have forgotten that her main character did have a family back home, which is kind of like a driving force at the beginning of the novel, and then just completely forgotten halfway through the novel. So that was a little jarring for me. So this ended up being a 3-star read for me, because I really did enjoy the writing style. I thought it was really cool that Lee Kenny was so heavily impacted and inspired by these heartbreaking unsolved cases that actually did happen in the Wicklow Mountains in Ireland. And I think her using this to kind of give some of those lost victims a voice was really, really interesting. And I do really like how our main character doesn't kind of remain a victim. That would just be really dark and really bleak. There is some fight to her, so I did really appreciate that. I will absolutely read more from Lee Kenny. It really was just her inability to choose how she wanted to end the story that kind of crushed my soul. So yeah, 3 stars. Really, really, really happy that I read it though, and I'm really happy that you guys pushed me to pick it up next. Super, super thankful for that. Okay, this is nonfiction. I've had this book forever, and it's like beaten to like filth. But this is Gods and Kings by Dana Thomas, and it is the rise and fall of Alexander McQueen and John Galliano. I'm going to read the back of this. I'm not going to talk too much about it. This is a 4-star read from me. I'm just going to go right out and say it. And the reason that it was is because the time that I am most interested in learning about who McQueen and Galliano were is probably from the era of like 2005 to 2010. And I felt like that was the time period that was explored the least in the story. I really would love to have read more about them at the height of their careers, and instead we focus really, really, really in-depthly on the ascension, and then throughout it, their falls. So if you have no idea who John Galliano and Alexander McQueen are, Alexander McQueen, Lee Alexander McQueen is his real name. He was the head fashion designer of the titular Alexander McQueen fashion label. He also worked at Givenchy. And over here we have John Galliano. John Galliano, not a great person. Did some really awful, questionable things, but he was the creative director at Dior, alongside his own individual fashion label, Galliano, and worked at a time at Margiela. He worked at Givenchy as well. And it's kind of about their mark on fashion as a whole. I love fashion history. I love fashion history. It is probably the thing I read about second to horror. I don't talk about it that much on my channel, but I did really, 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 really want to read this book because McQueen is, without a doubt, my favorite designer, and I think his life is really interesting. So it says, in the mid-1990s, John Galliano and Alexander McQueen exploded onto a fashion scene that was in an artistic and economic rut. Their daring vision shook the establishment out of its bourgeois, minimalist stupor with vibrant, sexy designs and theatrical runway shows. By the end of the decade, each had been hired to run one of couture's most storied houses, Galliano at Dior and McQueen at Givenchy. They were icons of a new generation of rock star designers who headlined the transformation of luxury fashion from a small clutch of family-owned businesses into a global, multi-billion-dollar corporate industry. But the pace was unsuitable. In 2010, McQueen took his own life. A year later, Galliano was fired in the wake of an alcohol-fueled anti-Semitic diatribe. In her groundbreaking work, Gods and Kings, acclaimed fashion journalist Dana Thomas tells the true story of 2 unforgettable artists. In doing so, she pulls back the curtain on the revolution that has remade high fashion over the last 2 decades and the price it demanded from the very ones who saved it. This book is fantastic if you really do want to learn about these 2 designers and to really look into their work. If you're into horror fashion and punk rock fashion and Vivienne Westwood, McQueen is incredible. He was so thoroughly inspired by horror movies. He has an entire thing on The Birds by Hitchcock. He has an entire show on inspired by The Shining. He really, really, really loves horror. So still kind of related to this channel. But 4 stars, really, really, really loved that book. All right, and last but not least, I have Teleportasm by Joshua Milliken. This is book 3 in the Killer VHS series by Shortwave Publishing. I really, really enjoy this series. It's like Goosebumps, but gorier. They're very much like B movies. They're funny, they're over the top, they are grotesque, they are cheesy, they are fun, and that is why I like them. So this one says, 4 friends unearth a unique VHS tape that, when viewed, causes short-distance teleportation, with euphoric after effects, inadvertently launching a perilous trend. As copies of the original tape are made, the results become less predictable and ultimately gruesome, due to an analog generational decay. Despite the danger, some will risk everything for just one more trip. This is fun. This is fun. This is definitely my least favorite of the killer VHS stories that I have read. I have read 1, 2, 3, and 5. I'm about to read 4. But I still really enjoy this series. This was the debut release from Joshua Milliken. I liked his prose. I liked his concepts. He kind of makes this almost like an episodic chapter by chapter story with kind of an overarching frame story surrounding our like frame main characters who kind of relate back to every story that is told episodically, if that makes sense. And I wish he hadn't done that. I really wish we had gotten more backstory on our main characters. I wish it had been a little bit more linear. It could have maintained the episodic nature of it, but I wanted a little bit more cohesion. I do think that the Snaps Was Here chapter was heartbreakingly well done. He was definitely heavily inspired by Cronenberg, by Stephen King, by a lot of like the great body horror, eldritch horror, and traditional horror writers and directors and filmmakers, everything really. And so I really appreciated seeing where he was coming from. However, I just think it needed a little bit more fine-tuning and a little bit more character development. And check the trigger warnings on this, because this should be fun and campy. And there's one chapter that is like, you didn't have to go there. You really didn't. And it's like stuck in my brain, and I wish I could unsee what my brain conjured up when I read those words. But check the trigger warnings on this. If you're sensitive to things happening to animals, this might be a skip for you. It's a very brief chapter, but it is very detailed, it is very gross, and it is very sad. So this was a 3-star for me. I will continue to read the Killer VHS series, and I would definitely pick up something else by Joshua Milliken in the future, but solid attempt at a debut release. Nothing mind-blowing, but definitely fun, and definitely fit in with the concept of Killer VHS. So if you're unfamiliar with the series, every horror story is centered around this concept of a VHS or like some kind of video recording, which causes all of the horror that ensues to our main characters. So really, really cool and fun, campy concept. And this one had an interesting take on it. If you liked Ghost Eaters and that whole like Clay McLeod Chapman like analogy for addiction, you might really like this. This one's a really interesting take on addiction and using horror as a metaphor for it. So I did actually quite appreciate that. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. Those were my 4 reads for the month of April. So 4 reads for the 4th month. Haha. And I had only 4 and 3-star reads. So that's, you know, not amazing, but not bad. Like I really did enjoy all of the books that I read, which can't ask for much more than that. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post twice a week, trying to get back to my Monday, Thursday routine. And if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah!